Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Lovers. I'm the Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement. That's the European quarterly magazine, but also bi-weekly newsletter. In this next hour, we have a live webinar, and we'll talk about supply chain leadership, and we also go through the top 28 of Supply Chain Executive Europe. I'm very excited to have 4 experts with me. So from left to right, I will introduce you briefly. So first, welcome, Paul Campbell, responsible for supply chain across Europe at PepsiCo. Paul, welcome.
Hello, everybody.
And maybe, Paul, maybe you can explain a bit about PepsiCo. What is your responsibility and what kind of products does PepsiCo produce and sell and distribute?
Yeah, so hi, everybody. Just very quickly, I look after supply chain across Europe, which is, for us, is full end-to-end make, move, plan, and buy across multiple categories. We're called PepsiCo, but we're a food and beverage company. You'll all know the brand Pepsi, but Gatorade is one of our products, but we're also very big in foods with Doritos, Lay's, Quaker Oats. That's part of our portfolio. And in Europe, it's an integrated business across both of those supply chains, run as an integrated both make and move operation. Just very quickly, we have about 60 plants across Europe that we own, a large network of third-party manufacturers as well, and obviously, quite a significant distribution network.
Okay, thanks. And next, Fred Brutt. He is head of supply chain EMEA and APEC at MSD. Fred, hi. Can you explain a bit about your business?
Yes, so MSD is a pharmaceutical company with 60 billion revenue and oversee the end-to-end supply chain and operations function from the manufacturing plant FIGO to the patients and for the entire product portfolio. So my responsibility is to develop a strategic approach that delivers internal efficiencies while transforming the entire supply chain to better serve our patients who are the heart of the ecosystem into MSD.
And what kind of products are you producing and
delivering? It's mainly oncology, vaccines, hospital acute care, animal health products.
Okay, thanks. And next, Jesper van Rijn. He is managing director of IG&H. Hi, Jesper. Can you explain it briefly, IG&H, and you go into that later on?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Jesper van Rijn. I'm responsible here at IG&H for our digital supply chain offering. And IG&H is an advisory and technology company based here in the Netherlands and Portugal. And we help clients in selected industries to realize end-to-end transformations, and that we do specifically and typically also in the field of supply chain.
All right.
And we're about 400 people large.
Okay, thanks. And last but not least, Oscar van Kamman, managing director at Inspired Search. Hi, Oscar.
Hi, Martijn. Thanks for having us here today. I will explain what I'm doing and what the company is all about later in the session. But very briefly, Inspired Search, we're an executive recruitment firm. And we specialize in permanent and temporarily positions at senior management level in the supply chain operations in Europe.
Okay, thanks. So a few housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on YouTube within 48 hours. Also, the PDF will be made available afterwards as downloadable PDF. The audience will mute, but feel free to ask questions. And you have 2 options: either use the chat function on the right-hand side, but I will track down the Q&A function, so you see the text bubbles on the right-hand side. So, do you have questions to one of these 4 experts? Please use the Q&A functionality. If these questions are in line of the conversation I will be having, I will ask these questions right away. If not, I will reserve these questions for later on. So, okay, and we have a Q&A at the end, but afterwards, after 5 o'clock CET, we have an after talk. So the 5 of us will be sitting down at table 1. So you can join us if you have some more questions or you have a further conversation with the 5 of us. As of this moment, I will put off the camera, and the other experts will also put off the camera. For a reason, you can enlarge your screen so you have a better view on the slides. All right. So to start off, it's a turbulent world, and as you see here, there are a lot of topics on the agenda of CEOs. So basically, this slide is showing the visualization of this transcription of quarterly earning calls of Fortune 500 companies in the world. So basically, these topics show what CEOs are talking about in their calls. And as you can see, in the middle, reshoring is mentioned. But going to the right, and it's a log scale, so going to the right, it's extremely important and quite often mentioned. You see shortages, but also supply chain, but also sustainability is there, and economic worries. Paul, if you look at this slide, so what kind of conversation you are having internally, and what is your CEO talking about?
Sorry, just coming off camera so that you could. So I think that the really interesting thing is clearly sustainability, as you call it out, continues to be fundamental for PepsiCo. It's not a part of the strategy; it is the strategy. Mm-hmm. So we have to create this sustainable business, and we've identified 3 pillars, which is we're a big agro company. Potato chips are made out of potatoes, so positive agriculture. Then we have a positive value chain, which really impacts the bit I'm going to talk about in a second, which is around everything, around carbonization, water, etc., in what we make, move, and sell. And then finally, we have a pillar which is around positive choices, which is how we're shifting our portfolio such that it's better for our consumers. It provides them with value rather than just a treat. So that's the strategy. The bit that probably is dominating people's minds is this element of positive value chain, and how we really drive scope 3. Because in simple terms, scope 1 and scope 2, whilst we don't know all of the solutions, most of the solutions are pretty clear, and it's within our control to a degree. But scope 3 is so dependent on the supply chain in the broader sense, and how we influence, collaborate, work with other peer companies to drive the supply base to create the right outcomes. Because I think most organizations are saying, well, scope 3 is going to be fine because it's scope 1 for somebody else. But I think that's very naive. Yeah. So that's a real focus area for us, is to really understand that and start to lay out, what is the journey to get there. And we have some very, very ambitious goals. Unless we're accessing scope 3, we're only tapping into maybe 15 to 20% of the problem. So. Yeah.
And Fred, what are the topics being discussed at the board level within MSD?
Yeah, that's a good question. First, I think you need to showcase supply chain as a competitive advantage to your CEO, the executive committee, and the board of the company, which we did as a supply chain team during Q3, which was super interesting. And based on that, let's say board meeting, executive committee discussion, I can tell you that 2 key strategic imperatives are key for the company. First of all, accessibility, and second, sustainability, the same as Paul. Accessibility, because access is one of our priorities as a pharmaceutical company, and for MSD to reach populations around the world in Latin America, Africa, Asia Pacific, with an emphasis on crucial medications such as vaccines or oncology, our supply chain must evolve. So the supply chain will be redesigned to enable better access. This involves decentralizing the network, packing finished goods closer to the customers, and optimizing labor costs through a mix of high and low cost location. Then for us, technological investments in distribution and, let's say, last mile delivery will support our patient journey, our patient access program, as well as facilitate the affordability and traceability of our products through blockchain. Then sustainability, nothing new. I think that's aligned with the company corporate ESG goals. That means a heightened focus on sustainability will reduce the environmental impact of the supply chain. So for us, the adoption of eco-friendly technologies such as phase change materials and circular economic practices will minimize the CO2 emission and waste generation. We get an emphasis as well on network design that minimize air freight usage and enable recycling will further enhance environment, let's say, stewardship. So we develop as well a program called Air to Ocean, or we transition from air to ocean across the region.
Jasper, when you look at this, you are having a lot of conversation with CEOs of all kind of companies. Are you missing some elements, some topics here mentioned?
Well, I recognize, first of all, many of the topics here on display. And maybe the one thing I would add, or what I hear a lot in the market, is continuous discussions on how cost inflations, right, energy cost, labor cost, etc., can be mitigated in a way in the supply chain, especially to right to keep EBITDA or profitable levels, let's say, in check. And I think that's one thing that maybe also from the role that we typically play is very much on top of the mind still of many CEOs that I talk with. Yeah. So it's about renewal, and I guess that's what's very much showing here, and about innovations, but also about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the audience, in Q1, this visual showed ChatGPT all of a sudden out of nowhere popping in right in upper right corner. So that was quite amazing that in Q1 all CEOs are talking about ChatGPT, and later on they understood that it is generative AI. Oscar, you see layoffs in the middle down there, but not anything about labor. What's your view on that?
No, I think that's the most interesting thing of this slide is that talent management, if you just use as a terminology, is missing here.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that this was an earnings call, most likely, right? So, but if you look a little bit further out in the next couple of years and decades, then the aging of the population and the labor shortages will be one of the biggest problems for companies to be successful.
Yeah.
If you just look at Europe, at the European level, if you look at the employed people aged between 20 and 65 roughly, then we have currently a workforce around 190 million people, right? And the prediction is that in 25 years from now, and so in 2050, there will be a reduction of almost 20%. So 35 million people will just disappear from the labor market. And that doesn't take into account that there will be an enormous mismatch between the skills available and the skills needed. And even in the State of the Union speech by the Commission President von der Leyen, she highlighted labor and skills shortages as one of the major economic challenges for businesses to come. And so the EU has launched a package and a program to address that. But I think most of the people, most of the companies will struggle with that in the years to come. And so I was a bit surprised it's not on this slide and maybe not on top of the mind of the CEOs at the moment.
Yeah, you have to remind, this is a reflection of what CEOs of Fortune 500, mainly American companies, are talking about. You see a lot of tech phrases. So in my opinion, my humble opinion, a lot of these companies, American companies, they have a tech approach to whole business. But look into the supply chain. We all know that, there's a linkage there, interrelationships, and I go through it quickly. We see two black swans, lower left side. You see COVID-19, we'll know, and war in Ukraine, February 24th last year, and still going on. Very sad to say. And now even in the Middle East, there's something going on, and that's also worrisome. But we all know this kind of black swans are leading to disruptions, lockdowns, shortages, bullwhips, and it's also leading to inflation and that kind of stuff. And on the upper right side, you see CSRD, or maybe CBAM might be a black swan for a lot of companies. Cross-border administrative methodology, importing CO2 costs from outside the EU. Paul, looking at this, what are the most important, or the most most important bullwhips and ripple effect in your business?
I think there's two or three things that play out. One is that we're talking about multiple black swans. It's not like one. So just the context is that this is quite significant. The other thing would be, and this is a very specific point, but it indicates how relatively unstable global supply chains are. If you wind the clock back into the middle of COVID, when the Suez Canal was potentially going to be plugged for, upwards of several months, and it ended up being 5 or 6 days, the disruption that had, the the ripple effect on global supply chains was immense. So it's clear that that shift of a steady state supply chain broadly pre-COVID has been completely disrupted, and there's a real sense of, you know, a requirement for much more resilience in supply chain. So when you look at this, I see, you know, bullwhips playing out both in supply as well as in demand as people respond to what's happening. You think about what happened through the rapid inflation we had sort of 12, 18 months ago. I think the significant driver for that was nothing economic. It was simply people like us, supply chain leaders, panicking because of the supply disruption, and the only lever we had was inventory. So we drove up demand, put more inventory in the system, and lo and behold, simple supply and demand, we drove up the price without realizing the consequences, because we all added maybe 5-6% of our inventory. That's a massive impact. So I think the thing that this tells me is how interconnected things really are, and the fact that you know, something happening in Gaza, you know, right now, there is, you know, a human catastrophe on all fronts, actually has a massive economic impact for our businesses and how we operate day to day.
Yeah, you know, and a year ago, at the start of last year, in the beginning, the American press especially wrote articles with the headlines like "going from just in time to just in case," and there was greenlighting to all the procurement officers to buy as much as raw materials as they could. So basically, that started out as buying all the parts and raw materials you needed, and you know what you, Paul, mentioned, that it was leading to huge influx of all kind of goods into the warehouses. So most warehouses all around the world are stuck with all kind of stuff, and most of the times are the stuff not being sold because demand has changing since the end of COVID. Fred, looking at this picture, what does this tell you?
I think I'm going to echo Paul's comment. I think we're in the same situation, even though in a different industry. I will only highlight, let's say, two topics out of that picture. I think the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has been highly impacting our organization, the company. So, for instance, we have to redeploy a bunch of transportation lanes from a Europe manufacturing plant into China, and this in 48 hours, just in terms of execution, the way we need to manage a turnaround really quickly. The second one is about, let's say, shortages. Okay, so how to maintain a reliable supply of components and materials for pharmaceutical ingredients, because the COVID-19 pandemics, Ukraine-Russia crisis, the Suez Canal blocking, Israel-Gaza conflict, and other events have tested our ability to maintain a reliable supply of components and material. So what we have done to address this, we'll build a kind of central organization that coordinates processes across the supply, operations, procurement, and science functions related to material management. So we define new ways of working, and those ways of working have significantly improved the supply reliability. Okay, so to date, that's a kind of central tower managed purchase order risk escalation across the globe, avoided some manufacturing interruption days, resulting in cost avoidance and discount and increasing the inventory replenishment level for kind of top product in vaccines and oncology. So that control tower act as a strategy steward organization, promoting continuous alignment between product and sourcing strategy and improving connection with vendors. And on top of this, in addition, that allows for proactive visibility of integrated risk management of our supply sources.
Okay. That's a nice lead into the next slide. This is the visualization of an ecosystem, and this is the ecosystem of household products. So last year in May, McKinsey wrote about business ecosystem, and later on, a month later, Gartner was writing about supply chain ecosystem. So I tried to Google pictures on ecosystem, and I didn't find anything useful, not from them or anyone else. So I created his own visualization of the ecosystem of household products. And basically, it's going from linear supply chain, from raw materials, manufacturing, and distribution, to this ecosystem where you have co-packaging, tier 1, 2, 3, and down you have all kind of distributors. But also in a gray area, you have other stakeholders like NGO, governments, banks, data providers, etc., education. And on the brown area, you see the logistics parties, but also lower-end recycling companies making this whole circular. And in the green area, you see now green players, bio-based materials, green energy, etc., but also green delivery. You see it on the lower right-hand side. So basically, you need this kind of visualization. So Fred, so if you look at this, so this is familiar to your environment. Where do you see the real bottlenecks in this ecosystem of yours?
Well, again, I'm going to highlight to the potential shortages and how to maintain, a reliable supply of components and materials. So something I already described just before.
Yeah.
And the second one would be how to manage the freight capacity and constraints during the crisis mode. Okay, that's something that been a bottleneck for us. So the way you need to manage freight forwarders, the way you need to block spaces in vessels or, let's say, airplane in advance, and potentially the use of charters, which cost a lot. So that situation have been, let's say, important into the company. Okay, the way to manage the freight capacity with the freight forwarders, that being a kind of bottleneck for us.
But when I look to the healthcare sector all around the world, but also in the Netherlands and in Europe, that's also, will cost more and more and more when you look at 10, 20 years ahead. It's not sustainable anymore. So that will also change this whole ecosystem, how you charge people, patients, etc., insurance. So that has also a huge impact in the ecosystem of MSD, I can imagine.
Yeah, sure. But then you need to manage to balance cost and service level. Okay, cost and, let's say, a service to patients. We're not distributing candies, so we have the obligation. It's mandatory for us to deliver patients. Okay, so one of the options to really balance cost and service level is, as already mentioned, how to move from air to ocean, as to reduce, let's say, the weight you get into your company using air freight. Okay, in the company, what we have done is moving from 90% air a shipment from 3 years ago to now it's only 20 to 30%. Okay. So then you spend 3 times less. So you can use that money to invest into your customer relationship.
Yeah. Okay. And Paul, what about PepsiCo? That's also related to your world, not in the healthcare sector, but in the consumer area. So where do you see the most important and real bottlenecks in your business?
It's interesting how many of the bottlenecks are self-inflicted, though, because I think that what's clear from the graphic, and we've talked about this in the past, is it's complicated, and you solve one bottleneck and you probably move it to somewhere else. Just theoretically, that would be the case. Mm-hmm. So actually, a lot of our bottlenecks, we talked about supply, as put it as well, that supply is a challenge for us, and making sure it's resilient with all of the volatility that's going on. And then accessibility, we've seen lots of peaks and troughs around freight, availability of drivers and fleet movements, real challenges in terms of moving stuff through the system. But when you peel it back, a lot of that is not driven by real demand. It's driven by either ourselves or our customers causing inventory spikes rather than demand spikes, which means we're over delivering and then under delivering week in, week out. And finding ways that you can smartly simplify the value chain and identify, are these things happening because of a consumer shift, or are they happening because we collectively in the value chain are badly managing this ecosystem? We don't respond directly to consumer demand, but we're responding to our retailer demand. Well, what's the most effective way is that if a consumer takes one of our snacks off the shelf, we make another one. That's how it should be. Yeah. The problem is, as all of you on the call will know, nobody runs a perfect supply chain. And when you're dealing with high volume, so, for us, when I say high volume, I'm talking hundreds of millions of transactions a day, each an individual purchase. Then if you respond to everything rather than the real signal, then it creates an awful lot of inefficiency. That is what's creating most of the bottlenecks for us. So really understanding what issues you have or what challenges you have in your supply chain. Are they there because they're creating value for a consumer or a customer, or are they there because of an inefficiency in how you manage it? And then focus your efforts on getting rid of those problems. Yeah. And one of the things I just close on this one is, one of our historical solutions to that was to automate. But the problem is, if you haven't leaned the value chain, you just automate the waste. And that is less of a drain on people, but it's still a drain on the system in terms of resources and cost. So you have to get your system right and then automate versus saying, well, I'll take the problem away by simply automating. That is a shortcut to trouble, I think.
Yeah. And by the way, Professor Janet Gotzel, she's a professor in supply chain, but she's also a professor in system dynamics. And what she is saying, we're getting in a more complex world, and in the world of system dynamic, the only way out is by visualization. And she's saying, this kind of visualization helps to say, okay, what are the real causes of bottlenecks and inefficiencies? So that's what she's saying. So she presses hard to do more visualization like this to actually tell what you're doing and try to solve. So now we're getting to the survey we did for our top 28 together with IGNH and Inspired Search. So and we get to the top 28 later on. But first, we had 3 questions, and the first one was, what do you see as the most important mega trends on the long term? And they can only choose 2. Because in supply chain we're prone to make trade-offs. So basically, the first 2 ones are digitalization, and the second one is sustainability, and also related to that, scarcity of raw materials. So Paul, getting back to you, if you look at this overview on the long term, do you recognize this? And is it remarkable? Those 2 topics on top.
Yeah, I think we've talked of sustainability. That resonates very clearly about scarcity and consumption of the Earth's natural resources. So I'm not surprised that fits up. Digital and technological changes, I think, what I'm keen to understand in my own mind is how much of that is flavor of the month versus it's a real issue. So is the advent of AI the default position for people to be saying, oh, well, that must be a big challenge for us? Or is it, no, we have challenges we need to fix, and digitizing our value chain is getting there? Because I think that's often what happens is, the things that are top of mind suddenly become the most important, whereas they may not be. So if you look at things like, the resilience discussion we had about value chain, maybe localization and restoring production closer to the market should be a bigger focus for people, because that's how you could make your supply chain more resilient. Now, it may not be the right thing to focus on, but I just wonder how much of that is playing out. Yeah.
So basically, we asked these same questions in the last 3 years. So it resembles a certain pattern, I would say. So that's one thing. Fred, on your side, is it remarkable? So we are asking 2 most important mega trends, most affecting the business in the long term. So what's your take on it? Are these 2 the same to you?
I will say that the first 2 ones resonates to me in my organization. So digitalization and sustainability. I think we already discussed a lot about sustainability and scarcity of raw materials. And with the kind of control tower we implemented into MSD to track and trace that matter. I would say for us, it could be as well relocation. Okay, because we're moving from a centralized manufacturing model only based in the US and Europe to a decentralized model. That means that involves decentralizing the network, packing finished goods closer to the customer, optimizing the labor cost through a kind of mix of high and low cost location. So that's the journey we have started already 2 or 3 years ago. That will be a kind of mega trends in the long term to reach our patients, as quick as possible in terms of the goal we can in terms of accessibility to our patient, and mainly in low and medium income market. That means Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and Latin America.
Yeah, and we did a recent survey called Decarbonization, Decentralization, and indeed you see more and more companies have a more decentralized model for distribution, and local hubs getting closer to the market, to the end market. And next we also have a statement here, but my main question to Paul first, where should the role of Chief of Sustainability reside within your organization?
Yeah, it's interesting. It is, where does the work sit, the work, versus where does the opportunity to drive change sit? They may not be the same place. So we talked about scope 3, scope 2, and scope 1. Much of that sits in our area in supply chain.
Yeah.
But we have to get the organization to change to make some of the adaptations and changes we want to make, whether it be in our world, agricultural change or packaging. For me to say, well, we'll just use renewable packaging within our portfolio is fine, but if it changes the consumer proposition dramatically, or it drives a product that doesn't have as long a shelf life, then that gives the business challenges. So we made a conscious decision to take our sustainability lead and report it directly into the CEO. It used to report into me in supply chain, and it was conscious around saying this is not a supply chain issue. This is a business issue. As I said earlier, PEP Positive, which is our overall strategy, is not a supply chain. It is the business strategy. It's how do we create, a circular world where we're renewing, the resources that we've stripped out of it over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And that's a business challenge. So we've made a conscious decision to do that. Now, is it a big part of my job? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But for obvious reasons within our business, we've made that choice.
Yeah. So I know Ewan Andrew. He is the CSCO of Diageo, and he's also Chief Sustainability Officer. So that's the other way around. And by the way, Diageo, Ewan Andrew is also in the top 5, just like Paul and Fred. And he made a business decision in the board last year to stop gift sets because, there's a lot of extra packaging around gift sets of Diageo products. And that was a major business move. So, but then again, he was Chief Sustainability Officer as part of that decision. So, there are different ways to get there. And I see your point. Fred, how about MSD? Is there also a Chief Sustainability Officer in the board, or how is it integrated?
Yeah, that's a cross-divisional function connecting the dot between different organizations such as procurement, manufacturing, and supply chain. But as leaders in all those organizations, we have all some accountabilities to deliver sustainability improvement, how to improve our sustainability KPI through air to ocean, scope 3 emission, for instance, if we look at manufacturing and supply chain. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oscar, what is your take on it? Where should sustainability reside in the organizational chart?
Yeah. I gave that a thought, Martijn, and I think I see some similarities with what quality manager we had in the past, right? And bottom line, I think it doesn't matter too much where you put it and place it in an organization. The only thing is if you put it somewhere specifically, then other departments and functions of the organization might think that's their responsibility and they might sit in a backseat, right? So personally, I would prefer that it is just part of all the elements of the organization, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's supply chain, marketing, R&D. Everyone needs to have sustainability as part of the key targets and objectives. And so to generate some effort and to generate some momentum, you might want to have a chief supply chain officer being responsible for sustainability. But at the end of the day, it needs to go back in all the functional parts of the organization, is my belief.
Paul, you mentioned scope 3, so it is easy to say scope 3 is not my problem. That's my supplier's problem or a distributor. But what I know, Schneider Electric, they have a huge effort in the last 2 years started, explaining to their tier 1, 2, 3 upstream what is scope 3 and how do you measure your scope 1 and 2 to make sure that Schneider Electric knows their scope 3. So what about PepsiCo? I can imagine that you also have suppliers that might not know how to measure their scope 1 and 2, which is your scope 3.
Two things I'd say. One is just almost forget what we think it should be. If you're in the EU, there's new legislation coming in less than 2 years' time that say this is how you're going to have to report, and it's as comprehensive and as detailed as financial reporting, if not more so. So now that doesn't mean that we can all sit back and say it's fine. Our suppliers will go sort it out. It's incumbent on us to help them because we'll be victims of that if it's a problem. So there's some legislation that's pretty significant change for most businesses. The other thing I would say is almost like Schneider is we have taken our top suppliers, pulled them together, met with them, with our chief executive and the business leads across the globe, and sat and said, this is our strategy. This is what it means. This is what we need from you. what do you need from us in order to be able to deliver against those goals? So very much a collaborative approach. Now, at some point, it'll probably have to move beyond that into one where we have some very, very stringent goals that they need to hit. But initially, it's acknowledging that we're all trying to move this agenda forward together. How can we accelerate it? And what changes do we need to make as a business in order to facilitate that? Now, that process started about 6 months ago, and we've got 6 monthly check-ins with most of our key suppliers now on what is it that's changing? How do we drive this? What does it mean for both businesses?
Getting to the next slide of our short survey, we had 3 main questions. So here we state, what are the 2 most important boardroom topics at this moment? And then all of a sudden you see sustainability and circular supply chain dropping down a lot. So that's worrisome, in my opinion, or not. What do you think if you look at this slide, Paul?
I wonder whether it's back to my earlier point is I'm not suggesting that the chief executives thinks it's solved now. No. But I think that they're saying, look, we're on it, we're working it. It's a piece of work that from a sustainability standpoint, that we're building resources for and capability. But right now, I've got all of this change to deal with, and I've got massive cost inflation. That's hitting me in the face today. So I think that might be playing out. Now, the danger with that is that if you take particularly climate, pushing sustainability out doesn't mean, well, it's okay, we can suddenly deliver our goal in 5 years' time. Yeah, but if your emission goal is met in 5 years' time because you've done a massive step change in 4.5 years, that's 4.5 years of emissions that are in the environment that you're never going to get back. So you have to be making incremental improvements year on year in order to get to your goal. The glide path needs to be a continual downwards trend rather than cross your fingers and hope that some massive breakthrough will happen, because by then it's the emissions are already out there. So I think it's a watch out, Martijn, as you say, but I think it's driven by probably very immediate concerns that the boardrooms have got.
Okay. Jasper, looking at this, the 2 top ones about digitalization, also cost containment. What do you see? Do these digitalization, digital projects help out to cut cost or be more efficient? What's your take on that?
Yeah, certainly, I would say. So first of all, we see a lot of initiatives in the different sectors, in the different clients, also where we work for, trying to digitize and automate, let's say, processes in their supply chains as a means to reduce or to become more cost effective. So we certainly see a lot of efforts going on, and I think we're also seeing a lot of impact made. I think also we're also still at the beginning of their journey. I think if you talk to the supply chain leaders in the different sectors and their ambitions, I think they all share an ambition to take that much further than they are today, right? And not only in digitization but also in automation of operations. So I think there's an increasing focus on those domains. Absolutely.
And getting back also to sustainability, because of CSRD, we have to measure our carbon footprint as of next year. So you have to have your carbon footprint of transportation, and now all of a sudden, all kind of software vendors popping up, having this kind of functionality to support this, and all existing vendors are also adding next to their cost KPI a carbon footprint KPI or a lever in this environment. So that's also happening right now. So it's also interlinked that this digitalization is also happening for the good reasons and purpose of sustainability. Another thing is, and maybe Fred, maybe you can comment on that. I think that talent and change management is rated very low in this a survey where they have to pick 2 most important boardroom topics at this moment. What do you think? Is talent and change management underrated?
I think that's a little bit surprising. To me, talent and change management, people management, that should be part of our, let's say, supply chain leaders' DNA and spine of leadership. So you need to act on a day-to-day basis in this matter. So recognizing the critical role of our employees, I'm sure and I'm convinced that investment are key to continue in leadership development while embracing the changing digital landscape. So kind of rotation, development programs, experiential assignment will equip supply chain people with necessary capabilities to excel in this vast and kind of multifaceted field. And to me, it's a little bit strange to see that level of perception because the supply chain organization has a unique position in the organization as it touches the product from the earliest point of raw material sourcing through operation and final distribution to customer. And our ways of working must also reflect that. So I think it should be on a higher score on that matter. At least for us, it is.
Okay. Maybe it's related to this. So we had also put out a statement to all kind of executives for our top 28 survey. Basically, we said that the supply chain officers should be the ones helping out to streamline the talent pipeline end to end. So identifying the bottlenecks within the pipeline from onboarding to developing and get the talents up there. So, Paul, how do you have a look at this slide and this visualization? Is the supply chain officer the one to help out this talent pipeline?
I think in many ways, yes, because without sort of depersonalizing it, the talent pipeline is a process. And in majority of cases, our supply chain leaders are very process driven. You just stand back and think about in most of our businesses how rigorous we are at approving a capital proposal for $500,000. Okay, there's a process in most of our businesses, sign off, it needs to get authorized, there's a financial payback. When we recruit somebody at a director level in the organization, that's a much bigger commitment than $500,000 of capital. Yet we don't have the same rigor in terms of a process in many organizations. We spend an awful lot of time developing internal talent as well as external talent. But what we've introduced over the last 3 or 4 years is some pretty rigorous tools that are not binary. It's not you meet a certain criteria, you pass go or not, but they're really to help diagnose as a leader, where do you need to go with people to really understand both before they join the organization. So through the pre-recruitment phase, we'll take people through a couple of assessment tests that really identify areas, not that we think are going to be barriers to them joining, but areas that we need to probe deeper. And that's come from some of the supply chain work we've done about diagnostics. So I think there's absolutely a role to play. The other side of it is in many of our businesses, particularly fast-moving consumer goods businesses, actually the majority of the people sit in the supply chain. And therefore, we're a key customer of whatever the process is. So we need to play a big role in defining it.
Oscar, you are in this field. You are from an executive recruitment agency, but also in the past you are responsible for talent attraction, that kind of stuff. So, do you think that most companies have this kind of pipeline in place as a process, and do they know where the bottlenecks are?
Yeah. First of all, Martijn, I think talent management is almost has become a synonym for recruitment, right? And in my view, talent management is not recruiting. It's planning, maintaining, and developing your whole workforce. And recruiting as the inflow of new talent is just one element of it. And what first of all, to your statement here, Chief of Talent Development, I would say no. You don't need to have someone in your organization, because then most likely it will end up in HR. And I fundamentally believe that your talent management and the responsibility should lie with the business, whether it's your marketing, finance, or whatever department. So also with the supply chain department. Having said that, talent shortages will not go away in our working lifetime. So it's not a project with an end date. There will be no stage where there is no talent shortage anymore in the next 2-3 decades that we are running businesses. So it should be integrate part of your process and your scorecard and whatever you do. So it's an ongoing effort, and having new people in your pipeline, in your organization is one, but I still think there is a huge opportunity for a lot of companies to focus on retaining people and developing the people into the next role, in the next roles. throughout their career within the company, but also looking at what do you need as a company in the next 2, 3, 5 years in terms of skill sets. And that's not only personal skills, that's also functional skill sets. We see a huge shift from what you need today and what you need in the next couple of years. And if you don't start preparing for that right now, you will end up with big issues in terms of attracting the right people, where there is a huge demand for that same sort of people in the market. So I would say, no, not a shift of talent development in your organization. It's a responsibility of the business. It's an ongoing process, and not only looking at the recruitment, but at almost the whole life cycle of an employee in your organization.
Okay, thanks. Leading into that, talking about skills, we also ask supply chain executives, what are the 2 most important skills for supply chain leaders? And remarkably enough, and I'm quite happy to say so, storytelling and change management was coming up strongly. Basically, that was the number 1. So in the previous answer, it was more related to the digital, that kind of stuff. Paul, what do you think? Is it remarkable that storytelling and change management is the top skill for supply chain leaders nowadays?
I think on the one hand, it might be a surprise to people, but I think if you step back from it, one of the things that is integral to managing change is bringing people with you, whether that be people who are directly impacted or people that the change impacts indirectly. And you have to be able to bring whatever that change is to life for people. And what we're dealing with is a very volatile, very, very uncertain future. And being able to articulate to people what that actually means often requires us to create a visualization of that change. In doing that, we can bring them emotionally with us, and therefore being able to tell a story rather than get lost in the detail of a complex supply chain, and enables us to talk to people who maybe are not as deeply engaged in supply chain as we are, but we can bring them with us on the journey because they can relate to that story, either a real life example or an analogy that helps them understand. I think it's critical to bring people with you. So on the one hand, I'm not surprised actually that it plays a significant role, and it plays as much of a role for our own people as we try and bring them through the journey that we're on as leaders with this very, very, as I say, volatile world that we're in.
Okay, thanks. Considering time, we can talk a lot about all these answers, and I think there's way more to discuss. And maybe in the after talk we can discuss more. So, I want to explain what IGNH, Inspired Search and Supply Chain Media has been doing in the last few months. Creating this top 28 of Supply Chain Executive Europe 2023. So we have done this already for 9 years. So basically, the methodology is based on 4 quadrants: company success, financially, personal responsibility of a supply chain executive, personal visibility, and peer voting. So that's the whole setup. So I would like to hand over to Jasper. First, introduce yourself quickly about IGNH, because you are a driving force of the digital part of creating this ranking based on numbers, actually. So Jasper, can you explain a bit more about IGNH?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I did already a little bit in my introduction. So as I said, we are a company that helps clients realize end-to-end digital transformations. We're based here in the Netherlands and in Portugal. In Portugal, we have our technology hub. Mm-hmm. We focus ourselves on certain sectors only, which is retail and products in the broadest sense. It's healthcare and financial services. We've been doing it for the past 35 years. Typically, our work starts with helping clients build their strategy, either business-wide or functional, and then these strategic changes always lead to transformations, and for that we bring the capability teams or digital services team, be like data analytics, digital experience and transformation, and of course also digital supply chain. And we work heavily with some technology partners to deliver these transformations. So that's what we do. Maybe zooming in a little bit on the field of supply chain, right? That's where we really combine all these capabilities to help make these changes happen. And when you look at it, it boils for us down to three things that we typically do. It begins with setting the supply chain strategy and transformation agenda, where we help our clients provide answers, right, to the changes and the challenges, as we discussed, for instance, before. And then the majority of the work for us really sits then into making supply chains much more digital, right? And that first two things, it's really using our technology capabilities to make supply chains much more transparent, much more visible by connecting them, right? To really have oversight across your entire supply chain as one angle, and the other one for us is with all the data that's available, really providing the tools and the solutions and the algorithms to make your supply chain more intelligent. And that's either custom built, or we are also a partner of off-the-shelf solutions that we help implement.
So lead us through our process to get to the top 28, and there's also digital capabilities involved.
Yeah, maybe a couple of things. So the process, as you said, is similar to last year with the 4 quadrants. What we did this year, we extended the long list quite a bit to have a broader and more complete perspective, I would say, of all candidates, with quite some clear criteria in what needs to be in place, right, to make the long list. Based on primarily the financial criteria, we then down selected it to a short list, and then ultimately did quite a detailed and quantitative analysis of the top 28 candidates across those 4 different parameters or angles to ultimately come to the winner. And maybe we can go through the next page, Martijn, to discuss more specifically what we did.
Yes, but one thing, one of the criteria is you have to be in function as of January 1st last year. So some executives are not mentioned because they are not long enough in their current position, and they have to be working for a company more than 5 billion revenue as such.
Maybe,
yes.
Martijn, maybe I forgot to mention that also. I think the company size, of course, is a hard criteria in this one. 5 billion or up, and then also the ESG score is a criteria before you make the list. And then looking into the individual quadrants, right? First one is a company success, financial success. Ultimately, that's where we measure the ultimate performance. We look at 3 different financial KPIs, being revenue, really as an indicator of business complexity, and thus also supply chain complexity. And then 2 financial performance metrics, EBIT and ROCE, to reflect how well basically the improvements in supply chain have been realized. Now, I think we all understand that it's maybe from a supply chain perspective not the most specific metric, but it is the one that allows us to make comparison across sectors the best. So that's it, and that's what we have used in the past as well. And then also what we did here is we looked not only at the result in 22, but we also looked at the performance improvement over a period of 3 years. So not only where are you today, but also how have you developed over the past 3 years is taken into account in the rating on this particular metric.
Yeah, and I've seen the dashboard you have created, and adding extra years of financial revenue figures, gave a different look of the performance of the top 28, and that's why we see also quite a few newcomers in our top 28. Next to the Q1, you were also together with me responsible for the 3rd quadrant, personal visibility. Maybe you can explain how you did that.
Yeah, so here I think we made the biggest change versus the previous years, because what we had, and this one goes about the thought leadership, right, that each contestant brings on supply chain, and we wanted to make this much more quantitative than before. So what we've did is we've put our data scientists and data engineers at work on this one, and we basically, for all top 60 candidates, we downloaded all their posts, all their publications on Google and on LinkedIn, and basically put all those publications through a generative AI machine and assessed, let's say, the content of all these publications for its relevance on supply chain. And that has a whole list of outcomes, right? And based on those on that assessment of publications, we quantified the thought leadership that was provided over the past year, which gave a very impartial starting point for this quadrant. Rating on this quadrant.
Yeah. So basically, we have been looking at press releases, keynotes, university guest lectures, interviews, that kind of stuff. And I've been sitting down with Bruno, the data scientist of IGNH, and it was quite remarkable to have this young, talented data scientist, and I've explaining what I've been done manually in the last few years, and he has automated all this. So basically, I handed over a whole list of names, and he could run it through this engine he created, and then you get a quantitative analysis of ranking, and that's quite remarkable. You can even do it with your own employees if you would like.
You could,
but basically you have to design the tag words and the weight of the tag words, etc., etc. So that's quite amazing to see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Oscar. Maybe you can explain the second quadrant, and then we get to the listing itself.
Yep. Next slide, please, Martin.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Just a brief introduction. Inspires, as mentioned at the beginning of the call, we experts in executive recruitment and interim management in the field of supply chain, procurement, manufacturing, logistics. And we're coming out of the industry ourselves, so we believe that we know what we're talking about, and we're working across Europe. Yeah. I think this is the more important one. The second quadrant, where we looked at personal responsibilities, and we looked at various angles. First of all, in the middle, we're looking at the participants in the span of control. So basically, which areas is the person responsible for? And we pretty much following the SCORE model here. So is that person responsible for planning, sourcing, procurement, manufacturing, logistics? And the more areas you're responsible for, the more points you score. Then we look at the complexity of what you're responsible for. So, for example, if you're responsible for manufacturing, and that's in-house, then that's less complicated than that's more complicated than an outsourced manufacturing. So that's where we're looking and try what's the complexity of your supply chain and your organization. The same, not only what's in-house and outsourced, but also to what extent is the complexity more or less given the industry that you're in. So if you have a straightforward supply chain where you procure, you store, and you sell your products, that's less complicated than, for example, if you're active in automotive supply chains, where you source from a lot of different suppliers, a lot of components, from steel to electronic chips, and geographical spread with production cycles and so on. So the more complexity, either in your organizational setup or in your supply chain setup, the more points you score. And finally, on the left bottom corner, we're looking at the geographical scope, and that's pretty straightforward. Are you regional responsible? Are you global responsible? Or is it just one country? Although I don't think we have any leaders on the list today with the responsibility for only one country.
No.
That's how we looked at it for this year and the last years. For 2024, we also want to include the supply chain maturity and the sustainability as a personal responsibility. So that's work in progress for next year.
Okay.
Maybe one comment to make. If you look to the list, I think we're not completely in line in terms of the market diversity. And especially if you look at the women on the list, which is only one part of the diversity, there are only a handful, just a few on the list, where you see in the market at the COO, the EVP level in the supply chain, roughly 26% of the people leading the organizations are female, right? So I think as a collective team, we need to make even more effort for next year to identify all the people in the region and all the women in the region and making sure that they're on the list. And having said that, I just saw the recent Gartner survey where you see that the inflow of the total workforce in supply chain is 41% women. So the inflow is 41%, and the executive level is only 26%. So that we're losing quite a few women along the journey there. Having said that, it's much better than in the previous years. So I think we're making some progress. But hopefully we have some better ratio next year on the list as well.
All right. Yes. So wrapping up, the fourth quarter is the peer voting. So we ask executive recruiters and professors and ourselves. We know these people. This is a personal touch. So I go through this top 28 briefly. So we are actually out of time, but don't worry, it's all publicated and it's downloadable. So I go quickly through the top 28. So these are the number 28 to 25. You can read quicker than I can speak. So here you see 24 to 21, a broad range of all kind of industries and probably well-known names you've seen in the market. Here's 20 to 17, quite a few newcomers, as you see here, 3 of them. So that is quite interesting to see, and it's basically part of the financials you'll see. Here you see again, luckily 2 women. 16 to 13. From 12 to 9, you see some well-known names also in the list, mostly last year. By the way, Thomas Panzer just retired 1 week after this publication. So that's fortunate for him and fortunate for us because we're not that accurate. But then again, he is kudos for his number 10. Getting from 8 to 5, also well-known names and companies. And that's also related to the different kind of industries. And we have a Hall of Fame. So the number 1 automatically will go into the Hall of Fame next year. So Mark Engel 6 years ago was on number 1 2 times in a row, and we thought he will stay on for quite a few years probably if we don't move him to the Hall of Fame, giving other people the chance. So this is how we have done it. So these are the ones, the former number 1s. And now getting to the top 4, this is Airbus and Fred. Congratulations, you made it to number 3, high jump. So congratulations to you. And
Thank you.
And number 2, Paul. Bit of a surprise or not, but congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So, and finally, number 1, and probably you have read it, because we had 10,000 of views on our LinkedIn post and our websites. So Ian Andrew, he's a Chief Supply Chain Officer of Diageo, and he's also Chief Sustainability Officer of Diageo. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it in this call. Why? Because he is still negotiating at COP28 in Dubai. So, but I got a personal response from him. So congratulations to you, Ian. You made it to the number 1, and hopefully we'll get you live at an event or webinar in the near future. So we normally would have some time for a Q&A, but I think that the conversation we were having among us was quite fruitful and insightful. So I would say, I would like to invite people to our virtual lounge right after this. So if you want to have a further conversation with the 5 of us, so Fred, Paul, Oscar, and Jasper, please feel free to join us at table 1, and we can have a further conversation over there. There's more to read. If you've seen it probably online, the article about the top 28 is available online on our website. There's also an interesting digital transformation journey playbook by IGNH available, and Inspired Search has some interesting information on their website. With this, I would like to thank the audience for listening in. Hopefully the questions will be answered at the desk in our virtual lounge. So thank you for listening in, either live or the recording. And Fred, I would like to thank you, and Paul, thank you for joining. And last of all, but not least, IGNH, Jasper and Oscar, thank you for joining and creating this top 28 for this year. And thanks for now. And with this, I would like to wrap up, and I would like to say for now, bye-bye, and maybe I see you later in the lounge. But I'd say bye for now, and thank you, and see you next week or another time. Thank you.